we're sitting here looking at a guy that enjoyed life. We're talking about a guy that loved his family. He loved to barbecue. He loved to lift weights. I went to the gym every single day to the shell of a human being.
And when these recent episodes hit you, what do you experience?
I don't know what's going on. I don't remember what's going on. I don't remember what led up to it. I don't remember anything. When I come out of it, it's kind of like being startled, confused, and not knowing what just happened.
You're having these episodes now in your late 40s, early 50s. You're having these episodes now where it's a dissociative episode.
Yes.
Okay? And you lose blocks of time, and this is why you're being medically retired.
Yes.
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast is a series of conversations, mostly with police officers, who say, "Hey Chaplain, I've got a story to tell and some hard-earned wisdom to share." The guests on Hey Chaplain come from all over, from LAPD to Scotland Yard, from big cities, and from the so-called backwoods of Missouri. They are sharing their stories so that you don't have to learn the hard way. And as a patrol chaplain myself, I'm convinced you deserve something positive and encouraging. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, would you just take a couple of seconds and hit the button to follow this show? It's usually a plus sign. If you would tap that button, then the app would know to always put a new episode in front of you, and Apple would know that thousands of you are listening to this show on a weekly basis. Today, we return to our conversation with Sheriff Sonny Byerley and his wife, Mikaela. This is part 2, so if you haven't heard part 1, you definitely need to stop and go back and catch episode 127 and hear some of the wild stories of Sonny's career, getting shot and stabbed and going through a dramatic officer-involved shooting and witnessing the hatred and violence of a big city riot. But in this part of the conversation, we see the vulnerable side of the sheriff and what Mikaela saw in her husband as the years of trauma began to affect him, eventually leading to a medical retirement. Here's Sonny and Mikaela Byerley. Mikaela?
Yes.
Tell me about the cop that you met.
He was always, like you said, Superman. He was always getting into, I call it trouble, but finding trouble. He was looking for trouble.
He's solving trouble, right?
Solving trouble, yes. Yeah, fighting crime.
Absolutely. I would never look for trouble.
He was always out. I just knew if there was ever something going on, he was going to be right in the middle of it. So it was a little bit, I used to kind of listen to the scanner, at first. When we first got married, I was kind of a nervous wreck. I mean, of course I had a thing. I thought, a man in uniform was like, I don't know. I didn't know that was something, but I will say it definitely was a plus for sure. So, I mean, I was very much attracted to that personality for sure.
And you're a veteran. You've got experience in difficult things yourself, right?
Yes. So I was active duty Army for 3 years, and I was in the Air National Guard for 7. So I went from Army to Air Force, which is not super common. But, while I was an LPN, which is a licensed practical nurse. And then while I was going to RN school, I was an EMT I was a medic when I was in the Army. I worked on the ambulance as well. And so we kind of joke that when I was on the ambulance, I was a white cloud. You were safe. Nothing was happening when I worked. We slept. I studied for school. When Sonny worked on the ambulance, he was definitely the black cloud. All hell was breaking loose. The world was falling apart.
I was going to say, I think the furthest she went was like to the convenience store to get a Coke because they got bored sitting at the ambulance bay.
She's just not a magnet.
No, he is a magnet.
So, Mikaela, who did you find when you found Sonny?
Oh, a very complicated man. When we first met, though, he was, like I said, he did have a strong sense of self and purpose and of disciplined, I guess is really the word I would use to describe him. Nothing was ever wrong. No calls were ever bad. No matter what happened, he didn't come home and tell me about it. He was always trying to protect me from it. All of those things. He didn't share his stories with me unless it was something funny or something. But like I said, I did hear about the wrestling and the naked woman at the house, whatever. So I hear those kinds of things, but he would never tell me, if
But those are more funny than they are like tragic or traumatic.
For you.
Yeah. So he just never shared those kinds of things. And I felt like it was put a little bit of distance between us a little bit because you can tell, we had a lot of bad things. We've had just in our community, children dying and getting killed and things like that. And I knew he was there and I knew he was part of those, but he would not share it with me, wouldn't talk about it, those kinds of things. So I really had no idea what was going on.
At what point, Sonny, did you see yourself as somebody with post-traumatic stress in a way that, maybe you always thought that to some degree, but is there a turning point that you can describe where it's like, okay, I've got to take this seriously. I can't just keep burying stuff.
Well, I think that turning point was a little bit more dynamic than just kind of black or white. I would say somewhere 10 years ago, we kind of said, we joked about it. We would never
before or after Ferguson.
After Ferguson, we joked about it. We all probably had PTSD or seeing the things we are. There's no way we don't have PTSD.
So when did you take that seriously as something that could affect your life?
I'd say a couple years ago. Would you say it was before I became sheriff?
No, not really. Several years ago, he started traveling around the country, doing church security and working with a company that did church security and doing different kind of teaching and things like that. While he was there, he was introduced to other people from other areas, and PTSD was a topic that they would teach about and talk about during conferences and things like that. I think during that, he started realizing some of his symptoms, those kinds of things, plus the fact of our home life. I would point it out at different times, different things we were struggling with. I had mentioned on several occasions wanting him to get therapy. Why don't you go talk to somebody? Why don't you go do this? I saw symptoms. I'm a nurse. I kind of would see things and I didn't think he was handling them right, but had no idea what to do about it. So I don't remember how, but he ended up teaching a class on PTSD, just the basics. What is it? Definitions, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that was 3 years ago at the national conference.
In teaching that class, I think he started seeing himself in those symptoms. He was open, became a little bit more open and saw that how it was affecting people in his audience and how, wow, maybe these people are struggling with that too. And I think it just started opening his awareness. He still wouldn't seek help or therapy or anything like that, really.
Let me throw one dynamic in there. Still today, I feel like Mikaela and I have had a very good relationship. Even though, she's describing, we had struggles. I had no idea we had those struggles. I never realized we had fights in our marriage until recently. My post-traumatic stress got so bad after my last surgery that the nurses were concerned because I was having a flashback and they couldn't bring me out of it. So they went and got Mikaela and she was able to bring me out of it. But her describing what was taking place is I was in such a state of hypervigilance, even under partial sedation. I was trying to get out of that hospital because I had to get away from whatever the danger was. And they put me on medication that I had a reaction to. That caused me, my post-traumatic stress, to go into hyperspeeds. That's when, our turning point was probably 3 years ago to where I started going, wow, that's probably me, to ground zero, to where now I'm pacing the floor. I'm going 4, 5, 6 days without sleeping or eating. Everything's a threat. I'm trying to hear what that noise was that nobody else heard. We're sitting here looking at a guy that enjoyed life. We're talking about a guy that loved his family. He loved to to barbecue. He loved to lift weights. Before this all took place, I was 250 pounds, and I was probably somewhere between 12 and 14% body fat. So, I mean, I'm looking at about 215 pounds of lean muscle. I went to the gym every single day to the shell of a human being. Mikaela and I started looking back to see kind of when this started and what caused it. What was triggering all of these things that I was experiencing. And she said, I guess the first time was back in early 2015, after you came back from Ferguson. You had a meltdown, and I had never seen you have a meltdown before. She's like, you went ballistic. You were angry. You were cussing. You were just mad because I chose to sit somewhere you didn't want to sit. And I was being embarrassed in front of my family. Then we started making these realizations that those happened several times over the course of each year.
So you got this Superman cop, and he's going through, he's 15, 20, going on 25 years into his career, but and running for sheriff and that kind of thing. But even before he ran for sheriff, you're seeing cracks in the armor. Can you describe what that was like?
It was scary. There were times he just didn't respond normally. And I couldn't figure out, it seemed like I never could figure out what would trigger. But, we would go on vacation and we'd be with our family. We live in Florida, and we'd all have a great time. And all of a sudden we'd get in the car and I would say something, make a comment about, I want to stop for ice cream, but he didn't. Something, irrelevant to anything important. And it was like he would switch. There was a switch, and he'd get out of the car. He started roaming down, just walking down the highway, and nobody could get him back in the car. I couldn't figure out why he was mad. And I describe it as a robot. He looked like he just became a robot. He had no emotion. You couldn't get through. And that first episode he talked about, my daughter was, I don't remember how old she was, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, in that really cute stage. And I thought, he kind of turned into that robot mode, and I couldn't get through. And I thought, well, she's the apple of his eye. She's going to be able to talk to him, and he's going to snap out of it and whatever. And even she couldn't get through. And I was terrified. And I'm like, who am I going to call? So during these episodes, he wasn't the sheriff, but he was still a cop, and very known and respected and all of that. And I'm like, who am I going to call? I can't call other cops to come. And then his image is shot. I can't call. Who am I going to call? We live in a small town. Everybody knows everybody. I'm going to ruin his image. They're going to think he's crazy, and he's not. He's absolutely not crazy. He can make decisions. And even during these times, and he calls them blackouts. I call it robot mode. They might last a couple of hours or a few days, never know what's going to set it off and never know what's going to bring him out of it. And then he comes out of it very sorrowful and like, what's going on? Why are you mad at me? Well, what's going on? I had no idea that these were things called dissociation, where his brain is protecting himself from something that it perceives as dangerous. I didn't know any of those things. Nobody had ever taught me about that or whatever. And who do you call? So you don't call 911 when you're scared and those kinds of things. So I just suffered through it till he got to the surgery. And he had surgery in May, and they came out and said, she met me at the door and was like, he's reliving being shot. And he had never mentioned to me ever that even bothered him. It was just a story. Never would I have guessed that bothered him. And I get in there, and he looked terrified. And I just mentioned, hey, you're safe and you're okay. And he just settled down. And then it was, get me out of here, get me out of here. So he had that reaction to surgery, and then they put him on steroids. So I don't know if anybody has ever been on steroids. He was on high doses for a very long time. And the doctor describes it just put him in a psychosis. And so that was the pacing and the finger moving. And I'm like, I'm taking this. We basically wake up one day to this man who is the sheriff, who carries himself like a cop, who's very disciplined, who's very godly. And he's roaming like around the house like a crazy man. You're just like, who is this person? And this is the person that's supposed to protect me. It was very scary. And he stopped eating. He wasn't sleeping. He lost a whole bunch of weight. I kind of ceased to exist. It was all just like a robot. He had no emotions, except for anxiety. And it was a very terrifying situation. I picture his brain, and I think most men's brains are full of boxes. And they just go through and they stuff them full. Each compartment, it's a compartment, and they stuff it as full as they can. And then they shut the box, and then they go to the next box and they put stuff in that box. And I feel like this medication opened up all the boxes, and all of a sudden he didn't know what to do with it. And so he's trying to shove them all back in, but it's like a jack in the box or
like a whack-a-mole.
Yeah, whack-a-mole. And you whack it and it keeps coming back. You can't ever put anything back in the box. And so I feel like that's where we're kind of at, is now, he's been so disciplined and strong. And then now all of a sudden he's like dealing with all these emotions that he never dealt with, that he never handled, all these situations that has never bothered him. So I would think. And then now all of a sudden they're all there. They're all right there. And he's having nightmares. He can't sleep.
And we're not just talking about a nightmare. We're talking about, there's nights that I'll have 8, 9, 10 nightmares at a time. And it's not that, some of the times it's not just because I have the nightmares that I can't sleep. It's because I don't want to have the nightmares anymore, or something triggered me during that day. So I'm back in that state of hypervigilance.
And so 51 years old, and all the stuff has been released, and it is majorly disrupting your life.
Yes.
Okay? This is not an acute stress. This is a stress disorder.
Yes.
Okay. And so you're now going to be medically retired from your second term.
Yes.
Sheriff.
Yes.
What does the path forward look like for the two of you?
So, believe it or not, the vision for us hasn't changed. We've always known that we're walking a path for God. I'm currently about 3/4 of the way done with my first book. It's a daily devotion for those who suffer with post-traumatic stress or acute stress, depression, anxiety. I see us educating as many people as will listen to us, because they gotta understand what it's going to look like if they don't deal with post-traumatic stress, if they don't deal with depression, if they don't deal with their anxieties, that they need to understand what it's going to look like. And I'm not just talking about military veterans or police officers. I'm talking about anybody that is walking around with post-traumatic stress. We always want to key it in on veterans and first responders. But truly, we need to be multi-dynamic when we focus our attention, because we need to educate families to know what to look for when that police officer, or that EMT, or that paramedic, or that veteran comes home, so that way they can try to get help.
Mikaela, what resources and components are going into this?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a lot of resources. I think they're out there. But, if you just Google, and I've spent a lot of time Googling and trying to find things, that's something we want to help. So that's kind of the goal. Luckily, because of his Ferguson situation, he has VA. And I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about the VA. But without that, we would have no resources, to be honest. I think where we fail a lot is there's some things out there for the person struggling with PTSD, but their families kind of have to do it in silence. And I think that's where my heart is. I know I've had a role in getting him help and getting him treatment, and helping him to realize it.
I think she's kind of understating that, Jared. She has been the sole person in charge of getting me help and taking me to where I've got to be and supporting me. She's actually taken on the role of the supporter. And I see it a lot in families, and I know it's happening in families. They're taking her approach and just minimizing it. And we can't minimize that no more. We have to start getting some resources for families so that way they are able to not minimize this anymore, because minimizing it has gotten us where we're at now.
Mikaela, how do you even begin to untie this knot and solve this problem for the man that you love?
I think the main thing, it's been lonely for me. I think that's probably the hardest thing, because I feel like in most ways I've lost my husband temporarily, I'm hoping, but I have to be so not selfish. So I think, us as people, we think we're not selfish, but we really are. And when you're and it doesn't even have to be PTSD. It could be someone with cancer or anything. But when you're the person with that disease, all you can focus on is getting better. And that's all you have to give. And so he doesn't have anything left for me, for our daughter, for anyone else. And so we have to find that somewhere else. And we still have a daughter at home, and who she absolutely thinks he is Superman. And he wants to maintain that vision for her. I don't have a big support group. I think a lot of people, if you have a church group, if you have a big family, you have to let them in. I don't have that, but I hope most people do. So I think I just want to be there for people that don't have that support, and try to let them know that they're not alone, because it's a very lonely journey, but it's worth it. And I truly believe that God has a purpose and a plan, and that we will be used to help other people. I don't have any clue what that looks like, but
while Sonny is suffering, a lot of people might be scared off by that, especially if they witness any of it. They could be scared off.
Jared, I'm going to say I don't know why God's kept her around, but I thank Him every day that He does, because I couldn't have done it by myself. I can't do it by myself, because without that support, without that family dynamics, it would be next to impossible without God. And I know He's charged her with patience, understanding, even though sometimes she doesn't understand. But He's gave her the courage to stand proud with her husband because of what I experienced during those times.
Okay, Mikaela, people can easily judge and misunderstand what Sonny's going through. What do you want them to know about your husband?
I think the main thing is that he doesn't have this disorder, this problem, because he did something wrong, because he has a problem, because he has done all of this. He doesn't have a substance abuse problem. He doesn't do any of those things, but he is struggling right now because of his service to his community. He was 19 years old, and he's 51 now. And all he has ever done is try to protect those around him, protect his family. And he's sick because of that. And it really hurts me to see, with him retiring, unfortunately, it brings out not the best in everyone around us. And there's a lot of stories and a lot of lies.
They're looking for the scandal.
Absolutely, right? Looking for the scandal. And I just want to get out there and say, you know what? There's no scandal. This is, the only thing I could say is, if we would have recognized this when he was younger, he's really, we've only told a few stories, but, his whole life, even since childhood, has been trauma after trauma after trauma. And, most of us that aren't cops, especially firefighters, there's a lot of people that deal with trauma. But, I look at my past, and I don't have all of these traumas. I don't have to see, I'm a hospice nurse, so I do see dead bodies, but it's not the same, it's just not the same situation. And he has had to endure things and for other people. And I think he deserves respect, and he deserves support. And so in that, I have to sacrifice some. So his sacrifice is for everyone else, and my sacrifice is for him.
Sonny, Mikaela, thank you both so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Jared, thanks for blessing us, because it's an honor to be on your show.
Absolutely.
First and foremost, but just that your heart for law enforcement and giving us an opportunity to tell my story.
I want to thank Sonny and Mikaela for their generosity and their transparency. There is hardly anything more difficult than being transparent about your mental health as a police officer. But I do hope that you see yourself in them, because as the Byerleys have suffered, their instinct is to take their suffering and turn that into something good by helping other first responders. I've known a lot of police officers and a lot of firefighters who have felt exactly the same way. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain. Your view of debriefs changed in that first debrief.
I walked in there with this kind of attitude about, boy, this is going to be a waste of my time. We've all talked about this already. We've already done all of our tactical debriefs on this. The department's run through this thing with a fine-tooth comb. And I just figured, well, I'm not going to hear anything new. That was really what I guess probably the best way to describe that is walking into that meeting going, they're not going to teach me nothing. I already know everything that I know about this incident. I'm a policeman. You can't tell me who's going to dare tell me how to do my job or how to do it better. And then I sit there and I get kind of slapped upside the head going, hey, dude, you don't know everything. You don't really understand why you're responding the way you are physiologically, psychologically. But I'm going to explain it to you, And so it was such an eye-opener, such an epiphany to me to all of a sudden be like, wow, this is something that I didn't know existed. And it was something that really resonated with me and I've held on to since the rest of my career.
Hey Chaplain is a free resource for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. If you want to help this show reach more cops, chaplains, and other first responders around the world, please follow the link in the episode description to support the show. The views expressed here are the personal views of the hosts and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, let's pray for peace in our city.